This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Every day, thousands of Comcast engineers and technologists, like Kunle, put people at the heart of everything they create.
In the average household, there are dozens of connected devices. Here in the Comcast family, we're building an integrated in-home Wi-Fi solution for millions of families like my own. It brings people together in meaningful ways.
Kunle and his team are building a Wi-Fi experience that connects 1 billion devices every year. Learn more about how Comcast is redefining the future of connectivity at comcastcorporation.com/Wi-Fi.
I called up NPR's Franco Ordoñez because I had a question. Does USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, still exist? And you know what? His tone will tell you everything.
I mean, I think in some form or fashion, it does kind of exist.
Sounds like we don't know.
I think that's a very reasonable way to put it. I mean, there's so much that still has to shake out.
USAID gives money to humanitarian efforts around the world, hospitals in Gaza, soup kitchens in Sudan. And over the past week, I've watched from afar as Elon Musk and Donald Trump tried dismantling this agency, piece by piece. First, it was hit with a foreign aid funding freeze. Then that freeze was partially lifted. But soon there were reports that one employee after another was getting put on administrative leave. Over the weekend, there were reports that representatives from Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, had accessed headquarters. And then the agency was summarily scrubbed from the internet. You've been in touch, I'm sure, with people who are USAID employees, at least for now. Are they going into the office? Like, what happens when they try to?
They are not going into the office. I am absolutely in contact with different employees. They are exchanging messages with each other, giving each other advice, moral support, emotional support. Actually, a bunch of members of Congress, Democrats, went to USAID yesterday.
Yeah, there was an outdoor protest, right?
Exactly, an outdoor protest, and they tried to get inside to USAID and were denied. I mean, this is pretty significant.
What were they saying? Because there were a lot of them. Like, I was impressed with how many people showed up. You had Maryland Representative Jamie Raskin, you had Ilhan Omar, you had Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy. Like, it was a lot of people.
They basically said that Trump cannot do this on his own, that the administration can't do this on their own.
We don't have a fourth branch of government called Elon Musk, and that's going to become real clear.
What they see Trump doing is illegal because the law states that this was created by Congress.
This is a bluff. It is a harmful, dangerous, killer bluff. But they don't have the law on their side.
But is there anything they can do about it?
Well, I think you're going to see it in the courts, show up in the courts. How specifically that will happen, I can't say. But this is a battle that, Congress and Democrats have been waiting for because Trump has made very clear that he is going to try to expand his executive powers. It's going to be something to watch for sure.
Today on the show, what is happening at USAID? And is it a run-through of what's about to happen all over federal government? I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistant's assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
The PC gave us computing power at home, the internet connected us, and mobile let us do it pretty much anywhere. Now generative AI lets us communicate with technology in our own language using our own senses. But figuring it all out when you're living through it is a totally different story. Welcome to Leading the Shift, a new podcast from Microsoft Azure. I'm your host, Susan Ettlinger. In each episode, leaders will share what they're learning to help you navigate all this change with confidence. Please join us. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Before this week, it's possible you had never heard of USAID. So I asked NPR's Franco Ordoñez to talk a bit about what this agency does and why it's found itself in DOGE's crosshairs.
You know, it's tasked with basically delivering aid and foreign assistance worldwide. It was actually created in 1961 by an act of Congress, the Foreign Assistance Act, and an executive order by John F. Kennedy Jr. And the idea was to kind of unite these aid programs to be more efficient in order to counter forces, basically the Soviet Union post-World War I and post-World War II. One of the mottos was to, quote, lift lives, build communities, and establish self-sufficiency. Again, it's really a lot of this is about helping those in need, but also expanding or kind of advancing U.S. national interests, national security interests, as well as economic interests across the globe to kind of build more alliances.
So you could call the U.S. military the stick and something like USAID the carrot in the world of diplomacy and statecraft?
Yeah, I think that would be a great way to put it. I mean, this is about the power of kindness. I mean, supporters now say this is so necessary. Maybe the Soviet Union is not around, but there is absolutely a need to counter Russia and China and Chinese influence. China has its own Belt and Road initiative. You know, China's Belt and Road offers money and infrastructure money across the globe in developing countries, and that's a big concern of many administrations. So this is a way to kind of counter that.
Right. And I want to put the budget in context because I've read that, the spending allotment for USAID is something like 0.5% of the total federal budget. So tiny.
It is very tiny in the big scheme of things. And I think that really raises questions why the administration is attacking this organization so strongly. I mean, I do see it as in an organization that has come under criticism by Republicans in past administrations, feelings that it has, kind of been, in their words, quote, hijacked by the left. Republicans have long sought to kind of bring USAID under more, kind of government control. Democrats, on the other hand, tried to maintain its autonomy.
It definitely feels to me like over the weekend, things really began to ramp up inside USAID. And there began to be all these signals that something was not quite right. So tell me where the story starts for you. When did you first start to hear from employees within USAID that something was not quite right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw a few things kind of almost simultaneously over the weekend. First, I started hearing from USAID officials who were concerned about these reports of security officials being put on leave after denying, access to Elon Musk group, DOGE, access to some of the servers. Very soon after that, you started to see some of Elon Musk's tweets attacking the agency in very strong language, calling it specifically a criminal organization and that it's time for it to die. That just fueled concerns across the weekend. You started seeing chaos being implemented among these. People started reporting that they didn't know, if they were going to go back to work on Monday. One USAID worker told me that she didn't know if she was going to have a job on Monday. This led to a lot of questions about Donald Trump President Trump. And then on Sunday, he was asked about some of this controversy when he returned back to Washington on the tarmac. He very boldly and very bluntly said that they are making an effort to rid USAID of, quote, all the radical lunatics.
Well, it's been run by a bunch of radical lunatics, and we're getting them out. USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out, and then we'll make a decision.
And then soon after Trump made those comments, which I had to report on, Elon Musk held this Spaces, on his website X. He had this conversation where he talked more about USAID and said that it needed to end, that it was too partisan, that it was beyond repair, and that it just needed to be shut down. And he specifically said that he had the backing of President Trump.
How much do we know about the people who are coming into USAID, accessing systems, and keeping other people out?
We don't know that much right now. That information is kind of only trickling out. At this point, what we know is that they're coming from DOGE, which is Elon Musk's, Department of Government Efficiency that he's been running. When reports of those security officials that were put on leave for denying the DOGE officials from accessing the servers, there was questions about whether they had gained access to classified material. That's an area where you're going to see Democrats also kind of launch investigations. Now, I can say that Republicans, or the spokesperson for DOGE, did say that no information was accessed without the proper clearances.
But can't Trump just give anyone a clearance?
Well, I was just going to add, it's like we don't know what clearances they may have had, but Trump did issue an executive order on his first days in office, essentially providing clearances to a bunch of people just unilaterally.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I'm used to the government being set up to be transparent, where, of course, you would identify yourself, you would explain what you're doing as you're doing it. It's part of how you build trust. And what I'm watching with this effort at USAID and DOGE more generally is stuff like, Elon Musk on Twitter, when people try to identify people involved with his efficiency effort, he's saying what they're doing is criminal. It's a real just like overturning of expectations.
For sure. I mean, this is, in many ways, it's an us against them. And, this is the Trump administration attacking, in many ways, the government as a whole. I mean, he talked a lot during his campaign about, fighting the deep state, the bureaucracy of the U.S. government. And that's kind of the position that DOGE is taking.
Do we know how what appears to be a shutdown of USAID is trickling out all over the world? Do we have good information about what this shutdown, de facto shutdown, means for people who are in fragile places that may be relying on USAID?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot to kind of hammer out on that one. I mean, Marco Rubio issued a waiver kind of to cover life-saving humanitarian assistance, but there really is a lot of confusion about what that means for, specific programs. And we talked about some of them before, but again, you have like refugees in Myanmar. They are at risk of being turned away from hospitals. You got Uganda's National Malaria Control Program and whether they're going to continue spraying insecticide into homes. You also have clinical trials and treatment plans in South Asia and Africa and Latin America that are potentially going to be suspended. I mean, bar none, there are thousands and thousands of people across the globe who really rely on the money from USAID.
So you've been speaking to people from inside USAID. Tell me what the rest of their week looks like. Are they able to access their email, have meetings, do anything?
Yeah, I mean, their email is down. They don't have access to their computers. They're trying to figure out what their own next steps are. They're waiting for word that they're not going to go back to work. I mean, there's so much uncertainty. I've been talking to some who say they're basically hearing from colleagues being given a list of the things that they have to take care of in the event they lose their jobs, being advised to take out liability insurance, being advised to make sure you have everything that you can downloaded to protect all your personal information. Those are the kind of things.
People sound scared.
They are very, very scared, Mary. I mean, they're extremely scared. I mean, I've seen people in tears talking about this.
At least some members of Congress are talking about ways they can be more aggressive in pushing back against what's happening at USAID. I'm talking about people like Senator Brian Schatz of Hawaii. He said he's going to place a blanket hold on all of President Trump's State Department nominees until USAID is allowed to operate normally. How effective do you anticipate that being? Is that essentially just a delay tactic?
Yes, it's essentially a delay tactic. I mean, this is a tactic that's been used in the past. Republicans during the Biden administration used these holds to prevent promotions of military officials. And it kind of it slows the process down. It definitely makes it harder to do that. But there are also ways to get around it. That said, I mean, I think it shows how limited avenues that Democrats have to kind of fight back on these things. Yes, there are the courts. That will take time. And this is not far from the only court battle that Democrats and their allies are seeking to, take on. These are big challenges. And again, I think this is partially by design to kind of flood the zone with all these issues and try to kind of test what they can get through. I'm talking about the Trump administration here. I mean, they came in promising to disrupt, and I think you're absolutely seeing that. And right now, I think Democrats are trying to, kind of get their bearings and figure out ways they can attack.
By Monday afternoon, what's left of USAID seemed to be officially folded into the State Department. For now, Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that he was acting administrator for the agency. And there's also a page for USAID up on the State Department's website. After the break, how USAID fits into America's foreign relations and how we might feel its absence if it really is gone.
Hi, this is Dahlia Lithwick. I host Amicus, Slate's legal podcast, and I wanted to flag our recent episode, Trump's American Takeover.
Americans have this idea that when democracy fails, it's going to fail with tanks in the streets.
Listeners are saying that Professor Kim Lane Shepley gave the single best explanation they have yet heard of how autocracy uses the law to establish itself and what we can do about it. Another listener writes, I think I needed some contextual grounding amidst the maelstrom. Dahlia Lithwick's Amicus podcast was immensely grounding. Not like I have a lot of experience with my government becoming an autocratic hellscape. You and me both, sister, you and me both.
Everything that this administration does now that is bringing down democracy and causing pain should be met with friction. You may not be able to stop it, but you can slow it down.
Listen to Amicus with me, Dahlia Lithwick. Search Amicus wherever you get your podcasts.
Fred Kaplan covers the military and diplomacy for Slate. He says most people don't realize USAID is a key component of how the U.S. presents itself in the world.
I mean, USAID is a crucial bulwark of U.S. diplomacy. Everything that, the phrase soft power. I mean, anything involving foreign relations that does not involve the military, it basically, it's diplomacy through the State Department, and it's actual goods and services through AID, food aid, medicine, anti-poverty programs, environmental aid, technical assistance in countries all around the world. To the extent the United States still has a reputation as being a somewhat benign major power for all the stuff that it's done It is largely through the programs of USAID.
I mean, USAID was established in 1961. How's the agency been used over the last 60 years? Because I know it's been, a force for humanitarian aid, but it's also been involved in intelligence work, right?
Yes. I mean, it has a spotty career. It was created in 1961 to consolidate all of the foreign aid programs under one roof. But in the 60s and 70s in particular, they were involved in some of the dark side of American foreign policy. They cooperated heavily with the CIA in training police units of dictatorships, especially in Latin America. There was a huge report that came out many years ago detailing the ways in which they turned a blind eye toward, training in torture. In Vietnam, they were involved in many of the counterinsurgency programs, which involved a lot of killing people. They've also had one unit that is engaged in democracy promotion, which especially during the Cold War was sort of a cover for spies and anti-regime propaganda in communist countries. So yeah, like U.S. embassies and other programs generally, there is a dark side to this, but it's overwhelmingly been involved in as a humanitarian program. When Marco Rubio said the other day, Secretary of State, that he was going to exempt from the funding stop all humanitarian aid programs, I mean, that's basically what AID does. How do you distinguish that from non-humanitarian? There's really no way of doing it.
What is your concern about aid being cut off like this? Like from your contacts in defense, from your contacts in diplomacy, like what are their worries now?
Well, I mean, there are two things. First, just as a humanitarian problem, I mean, there are programs now in the world where they're not having AIDS drugs delivered, they're not having food delivered, they're not having agricultural assistance. So just humanitarian. Second, you talk with any serious diplomat or serious military officer who's a foreign affairs officer, someone stationed abroad, they see this side of the engagement of the United States with foreign countries as essential. Without it, we look like an imperial power. We have hundreds of bases around the world, military bases. These are seen, by and large, as legitimate because we also have aid workers working in these countries. It's like, okay, we're here, call it imperialism if you want, but we're doing things to help the people. We're not here just to, unfurl our global military reach. And without this aspect of it, we do look like just another imperial power without any values. Now, Trump, what does Trump have against AID in particular? Well, he doesn't like foreign aid. He doesn't like soft power. He doesn't like helping people.
He doesn't like giving things away.
He thinks it's a game for chumps. We're just being treated like suckers. But it's so yeah, AID, it's all soft. People like Trump view this as gushy. It's not real power. It doesn't make people quake in their boots. But, the world's a dangerous place. We don't have that many close friends anymore. And it's good to show that, that we can do good things in the world.
Well, it's not just that either. It's that USAID is involved in things like preventing tuberculosis, preventing and treating tuberculosis, and preventing and treating HIV. And in the end, that redounds on us because the less infectious diseases in the world, the less infectious diseases here too.
Yeah, no, there's no question. Anytime you can have like a hurricane happening someplace, and there's a truck that pulls up with food, with medical supplies, with engineers, with all kinds of stuff, and it says the United States on the side of the truck, that does a lot more than, a couple of F-35 jets in terms of shoring up an image of what the United States is about in foreign countries.
It's funny because Trump is such a PR guy, right? Like he knows the power of marketing.
Yeah, but he thinks marketing is showing that you're tough and making people submit to your will. And sometimes that is what you need to do. But, it doesn't cover the whole waterfront.
But Fred says Trump is not just going after USAID because he undervalues soft power. He also could have a bone to pick with the agency's democratization efforts on behalf of some of the world leaders he admires.
The democracy promotion part of AID, it's been a sore to Viktor Orban, the head of Hungary, Trump's best friend in Europe. He hates AID. He sees it, as an anti-regime. The war with Putin's war on the United States, it didn't begin in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. It began in 2013 when he kicked out USAID workers, saying that they were there to overthrow his regime. That they were in the post-Cold War period. AID was doing a lot of democracy promotion work in the post-Soviet, in former Soviet Union, including in Russia. The point is, AID is not liked by the kinds of authoritarian leaders that Trump has good relations with. So there's that angle to this whole story.
It's interesting. I've noticed this dynamic over the last few days. Whenever this administration comes close to touching a hot stove, like when they accidentally cut off federal funding for Medicaid, or when tariffs against Canada seem like they're about to really backfire, Trump immediately backs off. All of a sudden, it's like, yep, fixed it, not delaying it, not doing it. But I look at what's happening at USAID, and it seems like part of the reason this is going so far right now is that most of the impact is not an immediate hot stove effect.
Yeah.
Like shutting down USAID could be a big problem in 2 years. And we won't even know that it's because we shut down USAID,
Yeah, there are no big corporations affected by, the supply of antibiotics to impoverished people in Indonesia or something like that. But yeah, over the long haul, we will see it.
Fred Kaplan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Anytime.
Fred Kaplan is Slate's War Stories correspondent. He's also the author of multiple books. His latest is actually a satirical novel. Go check it out. It's called A Capital Calamity. Earlier in this episode, you heard from Franco Ordoñez. He's a White House correspondent for NPR. For more on how Elon Musk's DOGE is upending the federal government, make sure you stay glued to this feed. A little later in the week, Lizzie O'Leary from What Next TBD is going to be talking about all this with a reporter from Wired who has been breaking a ton of news here. You're going to want to hear this conversation. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Madeline Ducharme, and Anna Phillips. Ben Richmond is the Senior Director of Podcast Operations here at Slate. And I'm Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.
But you should fade out with Randy Newman's Political Science.
What is it? What is this song? How does it go? What's the lyric?
It starts out, no one likes us. I don't know why. We may not be perfect, but heaven knows we try. But all around, even our old friends put us down. Let's drop the big one and see what happens. And it goes like that. It's called Political Science.
What happened? We give them money, but are they grateful? No, they're spiteful and they're hateful. They don't respect us, so let's surprise them. We'll drop the big one.